So gentlemen, I welcome you. We are the Priest River Museum. I think some of you know each other, obviously, in this group here as well. But where this vision came to have you come and talk and visit is Roger, one night, he came and shared us pictures, and what you do with sharing of pictures or conversations, you hear the history or the past.
I worked 10 seasons for the U.S. Forest Service with most of these guys you see right here. First, I'll introduce to you each one of these people. Most of you know Carl Wright. Next to me is Larry White. He started out at the Falls Ranger Station, which is disbanded in 1973. Next to Larry is Wayne Kopishke, who's worked for the Forest Service, believe it or not, 50 years, and he's still there. Next to Wayne is Gary Weber. He now works at Coeur d'Alene at the airport as a dispatcher. He worked at Priest Lake for a number of years. Next to Gary is Joe Hawley, who is the fire control officer at Priest Lake, retired from there. And next to Joe is Don Strunk, who was an SCO, fire control officer at Priest Lake also. What we're going to talk about tonight is fires, fire control, those type of things, lookouts, trails. We have some individuals who are essentially gurus of trails, Wayne, and of lookouts, Gary. So we'd just like to get them kind of started. Why don't we start with Joe? He's been in fire control the longest. Kind of tell us how you got started and what you did over the years, and Priest Lake, especially the years you had there.
Well, I started out in Michigan, and I got my job with the Forest Service in '48 through the college the hiring program they had, and I got lucky enough to get a job on a lookout tower in northeastern Oregon on the Umatilla, and I spent 2 years on the Umatilla. Actually, I spent 15 years in and out of that country, but the first 2 summers on the lookout, and I was 18 years old on the first summer. And then I worked on Ukiah District, military, and school, and long story short, I ended up at Priest Lake, and I got that job because it was open, you know, it was available. And so yeah, and besides, my wife wanted out of Ukiah. If you've ever been to Ukiah, you'd understand why, especially you ladies.
Is it pretty bad?
It was like nowhere USA.
No place to shop.
Huh?
No place to shop.
Oh, no place to shop. They had a little grocery store and a bar. And
They have a church.
so anyway, we moved, transferred up to Priest in '63, and I was there until I retired, which I did in '80. And I got to adding up here, and I've been retired longer than I worked for the Army. I don't know what that says. But anyway, I really love Priest Lake. I still do. I live there and have been there for 50 years. And we bought a place. Some of you folks might remember the Lamberts. We bought the old Lambert Ranch from a couple named Corey. And that's where all the kids grew up. And getting back to Forest Service, I was FCO up there, and we used to have a lot of fires. And but I don't ever remember, maybe 1 or 2 getting away from us. And we had good people, good crews, and I really liked it. Gary was one of them. Larry was a neighbor. And I think Wayne was there. Wayne's been there forever. But I don't know where do I go from here?
Well, were you involved with the Sundance fire?
Well, yeah. Well, our district was involved in the Sundance fire. Dan and I went to a fire that was attached to it up in the upper lake. We were on that for a while, but the Sundance, not really involved, but kind of on the sidelines. And a lot of the operations took place out of the ranger station. And but we were having problems on the district that nobody really knew about. We had, during that Sundance, we had about 10 fires on the district. Nobody knew about them. And we managed to get crews to them. I remember one fire, we were heading up into the Boulder country, and they were paving the road up above, and the lady stopped me. She says, "Whoa," says, "you can't go any farther." And I said, "You want to bet?" And she would not let me through, so we drove around her. But we had to go. I mean, you know, they can redo their pavement. And so we went to, and all a lot of those fires were started from fire brands, you know, from the Sundance. And so we had quite a go there for a while. And we used to average about 30 or 40 fires a year. None of them were really very big. Then we used to average, I don't know how many broadcast burns we averaged. We'd start burning in August and never quit till the snow flew. And there was more firefighting to broadcast burning than there was to wildfire, as you know.
Yeah.
But I myself have been involved in, I counted up before I retired, and nearest I could come up with, right at 600 broadcast burns and 600 wildfires. On the,
Half and half.
yeah, one was 598, and one was 604, something I don't remember.
What's a broadcast fire?
Well, they're, you know these clear cuts? You don't do them anymore?
Yeah.
When they did clear cuts back in those days, when the timber, taking the timber out was all over, they got all the goodie they could get out of it. They'd put a line around it with a cat, and then a crew would go in and slash it, cut down all the junk, and then we'd come in the fall, and we would burn all the slash. You'd burn it by a plan. Most of the time we were successful. Sometimes they got away, and then they would be planted the following spring. And we were kind of under the gun because the district had to order the trees, I think 2 years ahead of time, didn't they, Larry? So they had to order the trees 2 years ahead of time. We had to burn, and which put us under the gun, and sometimes you made mistakes. But we got it done.
Were most of the fires during the season caused by lightning?
Yes, ma'am. Probably for every 10 lightning fires, there may be one man caused, maybe not. We had a pretty decent record, I think, up there for what we call man-caused fires. There weren't too many, and but most of them were lightning. And sometimes I remember one morning we come to, and we had 18 fires up in Gold Creek, up in that country, from lightning, all in one blast, and that gets you humping, you know. But yeah, mostly lightning.
When did our area stop manning the lookouts?
Lookouts.
The lookouts, no, we don't have lookouts anymore.
There's still a few.
Yeah, they're there, but they're not manned.
I think Gary could probably
Yeah, they are. Yeah.
elaborate on that.
Yeah, Gary's the expert on lookouts.
Guru of lookouts.
No, they're still staffed. Let's see. There's the state has two of them, Sundance and Lookout Mountain, and they're kind of Lookout kind of on an as needed, but they've got a interesting thing going. They've got one regularly paid lookout, and then she started a volunteer program on the other one. So they've been doing pretty good there. On the Forest Service side, I think it was right after Joe retired, we lost the funding, and we started a volunteer program, and for whatever reason it worked for us. A lot of other places it didn't work, but even after I left, well, the guys pretty much kept that going, and we got issues on one of them. Somebody stole the lightning protection, and trying to get that back because there's no real funding for that kind of stuff. And so South Baldy hasn't been staffed now for about 4 years, but the others, Gisborne and Indian Mountain and Hughes Ridge, they're still staffed every year.
What is lightning protection? You mean like the lightning rod?
Yeah, and lightning. It's going to have a lightning rod and copper wire that goes grounded and everything.
Copper wire.
I don't know if most of you know, but at one time there were more lookouts per square mile north of the Ponderay River than anywhere else in the country. So we had a lot of lookouts. I think Idaho overall had over 900.
Well, they figured out over 1,000, of course, not all at one time.
And they were paid positions back then, weren't they?
Yeah, they were regular GS.
And when they were a paid position like that, did they have to stay there 24/7, or did they get a break every, did somebody
the
come
crowd
and bring
going
them
up?
food, or?
You can sit there.
No, they were there for 5 days, and then they had also what was called differential, and they had time where they stayed on the weekends too, and also they if we had a forecast of lightning, then we would ask them to stay, and then pay them overtime. So, yeah, they were. And we had at the falls we had Gisborne, South Baldy, North Baldy. Well, we had South Baldy one time, and then we had North Baldy. It switched because it went over to Newport, and then we had Gisborne.
We had Cuban Hill for a while.
Well, Cuban Hill was actually never manned when I was there. Stone Johnny was, and I think that was it. Yeah.
Why don't we hear from Don a little bit? His
Don don't
experience.
know nothing.
Oh, he knows more.
Say that on record.
When Joe Hawley retired, I got the position that he vacated, and I was there from the fall of '80 until '93. And Gary and I done the fire protection for the area then. Gary kind of run the crews, and I watched him. I'd even get invited to go with him once in a while.
I think we need to hear from Gary. He's a Montana boy. He's been around fires for a long time. I worked with Gary in '73 and '74 in the Canixu IR crew, interregional fire crew. And he later became the crew boss. In fact, I think he was the boss when it was disbanded in the late '70s, early
I
'80s.
ran it into the ground.
Yeah, Gary.
Well, I like to say that I spent my entire Forest Service career on the Canixu. I started in Montana, where I grew up, and at that time over at Knoxon, that was part of the Canixu Forest, and it was one of those things that back then, when somebody from the Forest Service would come around to the high school in the spring and see what boys wanted to go to work for the Forest Service that summer, and that's about how it started. And and it was just a summer job was all I intended. I was going to be a high school math teacher and a basketball coach, until I found out I was the worst clock watcher than the kids were. But I'd worked there, I think I was just starting my 4th season there, and they got word that there were some last minute openings on the hotshot crew at Priest Lake. And of course it was all the same forest and rangers doing whatever, and the ranger called me in because he knew I was interested in doing something more than just sitting there on the district. And that's how I got started working for Joe at the lake on the hotshot crew. Spent 8 summers there. The last two, I was the crew boss. They call them superintendents and all these other names now, but I got my appointment there and really never looked back as far as
Why don't you
thinking
go a
about
little more depth on IR2, Gary, so they know exactly what they were.
the. I guess the basis for most of the IR crews, the interregional fire crew. Stepping back during the Blister Us program, which Wayne can talk about, but when it went away in the mid-60s, that had been the source of a lot of their fire crews for the bigger fires, and that was pretty much where the IR crews got their start in this part of the country. There had been some in California, and a couple of them in Montana had started a little earlier, but that was pretty much how it got started, and I think there were 7 or for a while 8 in the region there. Started, well, Connexu and several of them here in Idaho started in '67, and started out I think initially 25-man crew, something like that. Then depending on different things, it cut back to 22 because of whatever size of aircraft that they used to haul crews around in, and then later it went to 20, which it's still at now. But at that time, once in a great while, the crews would go to Arizona or California, but it was pretty much all just
Up here.
up here, yeah. And of course, one of the years, I know it seemed like we spent the whole summer on the Colville, but the Colville was part of Region 1, so it wasn't any big deal going there. But now, and that the whole business has changed. Everything. There's still, I believe, seven hotshot crews in the region, and only one left in the Idaho part of the region. And it's in Coeur d'Alene, and that crew went to Arizona last week. I just saw today that 3 of the Montana crews are heading for Alaska in the morning, and they're pretty much gone the entire season, and their season starts 1st of May, whereas ours always started mid-June, and by Labor Day we were done, and they're pretty much going from 1st of May till usually about the 1st of October, and then it gets at the end there that
Most of us were college kids who went back to school.
yeah, and they got very few college kids anymore because their season runs so long, but you get toward the end, and they're pretty well burned out from just being on the go the whole time.
What kind of training would a hotshot crew look like? What would they have to do to prepare?
Well, normally now to get on a hotshot crew, they've got to have some sort of fire experience already. And then they'll go through a lot of, besides just the regular fire training, a lot of teamwork type training, and because they got to depend on each other, and they've got about 2 weeks of what they call their critical training when they first come on before they can even be certified for the season to be available to go anywhere.
They pretty much have to have had a lot of fire training before they ever get on the hotshot crew. You know, it's like in the smoke jumper. They have to know how to fight fire before to be a jumper. They teach them to be a jumper. We teach them to be firefighters.
What does that mean to be a fire? What do you I mean, I can barely start a fire, so
We were trained to put them out.
Get some cedar kindling.
my husband with a torch, that's how the fire started. But what do you guys teach them about fire control? Is when if it's burning underground or on ground, or
Well, during
Go ahead, Larry.
there's a thing called guard school. First thing when people come to work for the Forest Service, if they're interested in fire or if they're hired in fire, they go to guard school, and guard school teaches them how to use tools, how to read maps, how to use a compass, how to a little bit about fire behavior, a little bit about getting around in the woods, just all kinds of woodsmanship, using tools, chainsaws, crosscuts, flaskies, how to work as a crew. You know, they'll show them how to dig fire line as a crew because you work all together. You know, you use a method we call the bump up method. You just get in a line and the first person starts chopping, and when the other person gets done, they say bump to the next guy in front of them. They move ahead, and you start working where they leave off, and that's the way you build fire line. And those kind of things is what you learn at guard school, just basic firefighting, and then from there, then you can work into other jobs like Gary was talking about after you've put in a season, say on the district level. I started and learned my fire stuff with BRC. I started in Kalispell Creek at Priest Lake.
That's blister rust control.
Yeah, blister rust control, and they taught us the same thing there. We didn't go to guard school. They actually taught us, you know, all of those things, and then when I got to the district level, when I moved down to the Falls from Priest Lake in 1963, then I went to guard school, and then went on into dispatching and fire control officer and so on.
Wayne, we got to hear from you. Wayne knows more about trails than anybody in the Idaho Panhandle, I guarantee it. Because he's been on most of them. Most of them you can't even find anymore. But,
Okay, well, let's see here. Where do I start? In '64, when I graduated from high school, or close to it, this one friend of mine says, well, I'm going to go to the down at Forest Service there, because they were at Sand Point at the time, the supervisor's office, and he says, I'm going to try to get on. And I said, well, okay, I'll go along with you, you know, and I just stand here at the desk, and some guy shoved a piece of paper in front of me, and I put my name on it. And, yeah, I'm not going to. I wasn't you know, interested in working at all, like for the Forest Service. And my God, about a month's time, I was up there at Priest Lake.
but you started with the BRC.
Yeah, you see, in '64, I started in the blister rust program. And my first year, I stayed in the old CCC camp above the Priest Lake Marina. That was the headquarters then. And they had different camps, blister rust camps. And they had, okay, like blister rust, they had spray camps where they'd spray the trees. They'd scar fire a tree and spray it with this active ion that was mixed with diesel, and that was to help the tree. And then I was always on the right pulling the end of it there. So I pulled ribes all the time. And then we sprayed ribes with that 2,4-T or D stuff that they used in Vietnam to kill brush.
I think what they need to know, Wayne, is this was white pine.
And this is the white pine.
That the BRC
Yeah,
was primarily.
yeah. It was primarily the white pine. And about that time, they were doing this. They got into the genetics part of it, into getting white pine that was immune to, you know, to a certain extent of blister rust, and towards about '68 or whenever. In '68, I worked at climbing white pine in order to find, you know, like rust-resistant white pine, so they could get the cones from that. And that's kind of how they got going into the program. But anyway, I pulled ribes for about a couple of years, and then I was a checker for a year to go out and check people who were pulling, you know, the ribes. They divide an area into like lanes and lots, and I, of course, I flunked a lot of people.
Did you tell what ribes?
Okay, you got, okay, a ribes is a gooseberry plant, and they got like two kinds in this district, mainly, is the lacuster and the viscosissimum. And lacuster is kind of a sticky plant. It's got spines on it, and you find it in wet places. And the viscosissimum, they got kind of a scent. They've got an odor to them, and you find them in drier places, and it forms spores. like like under the leaves. Those spores, it goes to the white pine. And the spores, they mainly get in the needles, and they work down the needle to the branch, to the bowl. And you've seen white pine that have got, like dead tops. Well, that's how you get most of your dead tops. It's got into the bowl, formed a canker. It shuts off all the nourishment from the canker on up, and that's why you get lots of dead tops on these white ones. And then those spores, they go back to the to the ribes plant again, and the whole cycle is back and forth, back and forth. And you can't pull all the ribes, so the genetics part of the white pine was the only way they could do it. And right now, I think it's 70 or 80% it's rust resistant now. That plant.
It's right in there somewhere.
Yeah. So when they plant these white pine out in these burns and everything, up the burned area, you have 70 or 80% rust resistant white pine that they're planting. That's the only way you could beat the system. You can't do it by spraying trees. You can't do it with like pulling ribes. It slowed it down a little bit, but the rust-resistant white pine was the answer to that. Well, anyway, in '69 I started in working for the district and the Joe Hawley Fire Control, and I stayed up there at Hughes Meadows for July and August every season. I lived up there. Yeah. And all I did was roads and trails. It was mainly roads. I cleaned them out. And during that time, you could drive on a lot of roads, and now, of course, you can't. They shut them off. And then I got on a few fires, but my main job was staying up there at Hughes Meadows. And I worked with Roger for a year or two.
Yeah, you took care of the lookouts.
Yeah, and I took care of the lookouts. And they didn't have a lot of people in fire control because they relied on, they relied on the other people in the district.
Right.
And at that time, you had about 100 to 200 people working in the district. So you could always grab people from silviculture, from timber.
Brush crews?
And the brush, and the
I
brush
was on the brush crew.
Right, yeah. And so they didn't need much of a fire crew. And then, let's see, then in '78, I started working in the timber program. Let's see, like market timber, cruising, painting trees, traversing, so forth, like that, just getting the area ready so the logger could come in and do work like that. And so I worked at that until about '82, and then in '83 I started in silviculture, and I worked at planting trees, and doing stand exams. You go into an area and a stand. You have a stand of timber, and you get the DBH a certain amount of trees. You put plots in and all that stuff, and you figure out how the stand is doing. You get information that you have to write down and all that stuff. So I worked at that. Let's see. We used to go. Used to look at trees that they planted and check them and see if they were doing okay too, and I mean these flow cuts. And then in '95 they were starting to cut back, and they put me on a surplus list. and there was a position opened in the office, and they had to take. and when I started in the office, I was working in, I see on the paycheck end. So I was the head end of all the paycheck and stuff. And then I was a backup for the front desk, for the receptionist. I sell maps, sell firewood permits, talk to the public when they came in, and all that. And now that's what I've been doing the last since '95. I'm a purchaser. I've been a purchaser for the Forest Service for a while. We get a lot of people coming in there asking questions, about campgrounds, all sorts of stuff. And they start when we ask about the trails and all kinds of stuff. There's one guy, I used to do a lot of hiking back in the 70s and 80s, then I kind of quit hiking around. But anyway, when I started in the office, some guy came in and wanted to know how to get up to some mountain. And I knew the trail was there, and I didn't know the conditions. I thought I better start getting around and walking around. So I've been doing that, walking these trails, trying to figure out like where you're at. I had to get my gear to help me a couple times. But there's people that are interested in the trails. They're getting more beyond.
Mary?
Yeah, and I've been like looking at the old trails. They've quit doing a lot of trails up there, and I've been on the east side of there too. I know that area halfway.
Without his help, I wouldn't have a hike program.
Could you go in a little bit of the history of the trails, Wayne? Basically started mostly in the CCC days.
Well, yeah, most of the trails were done in the CCC days. There's a few trails done before that, but the biggest part was done in the 30s. And they did all the trails on the east side of the lake. The federal government did during the CCC days, and then when it went over to the state quit, maintaining their trails. So their trail, they never had a trail program.
Well, was the trails primarily designed to support the lookouts?
Mainly they were.
Yeah.
And get you back
Fire
to the country
control.
too, yeah.
Yeah.
And same way with the west part too. I mean, that's why the trails were really put there. You couldn't drive at the time. There was no roads out there. The only way you could get any place was on a trail. When you look at an old map, it's just trails all over. Well, that's how you could get to anything in the district. And then they started in logging there and building more roads. And then they destroy some of the trails. So a lot of those, I would say probably of all those trails that they've done in the 30s, I bet you I would say about 80 to 85% of them are gone. I mean, they're there.
You can't find them.
But they're either treed in or brushed in and stuff, or they've been logged over and destroyed. And right now, their trail program, they don't have much of a trail program up there. They only got a couple of people in it, and they work for recreation, in the campgrounds too. So they don't have much of a trail program. And right now, the only trails that are being done are the ones, like along the lake, up the river, the ones that are used the most. And so let's just say that their trail program is just about gone.
Well, Larry, we need to hear about your career. Want to start?
Well, I started with BRC, as I said, in 1961, and then I went from, and we were on wildfires that year from about July till October. We were on the Salmon River the whole time, and then over in Darby, Montana, on wildfires. And there were a lot of us, a lot of locals that people would maybe recognize, the Fiddlers, the Brunos, the Kaisers. I mean, there were a lot of local kids on the fire crew, or on the BRC crews that worked at BRC. And then I moved from there to the Falls Ranger Station. I got a chance to work there, and I was the headquarters fireman, which was the person that took care of all of the fire tools and all of the fire packs and crosscut saws and you name it, all of the fire equipment and the warehouse, and took care of the lookouts. And then when I was had a chance, I was able to move up to dispatcher, and I dispatched to fires, all of the crews, and I worked for the FMO, which was like Joe Hawley was Dwayne Hadley, and then he moved on, and I was the fire control officer there from 1967 till the ranger station was abandoned or consolidated with Priest Lake in 1973 or 74, and we had 4 lookouts. We had Gisborne, Stone Johnny. This was at the Falls. We had Gisborne, Stone Johnny, South Baldy, and North Baldy. So, and we had a small fire crew, and we didn't have as many fires as Joe. We had probably 15 fires a year, but we did have a large prescribed fire program. We did a lot of broadcast burns, just like Joe did. I figured it up when I retired how many acres I burned, and it's a lot of acres. And but we did that, and in the wintertime we did a lot of other things too. We did same things that Wayne was talking about. We did cruising, and we marked, and we laid out timber sales, and I did a lot of range work. We had a lot of range allotments on the Falls District up in the Four Corners, and actually we had part of the New Valley at that time. We had land down there, and we had range program down there, and I did a lot of work with the Ranger at that time. And then we consolidated the Ranger Station with Priest Lake. I moved to Priest Lake and worked in timber management and watershed for about 3 years, and then they split up Joe's job. It was too much for Joe to take care of with a large district, and he couldn't handle all of the fire control and the broadcast burning and the piling of brush and all of those things. So they split the job into fire and fuels, and I got the fuels job and worked with Joe, but I did all of the prescribed fire then at that time, and Joe helped, of course, but I was actually in charge of doing all of that. And I did a lot of work on EAs. We started in environmental assessments. We had to do all of the things that are involved with assessing the areas before they logged. We did a lot of that. I was on a fire team, and all of us were on fire teams. We were assigned as, I was a safety person, and I was a fire behavior analyst. We went on wildfires and all over the West and in Alaska, and we had teams that went all over Region 1 usually. And let's see, I guess I retired in 1992, and I had like 30 years in at that time.
I've got a question.
Okay.
When the Sundance fire happened, did all of you that worked for the Forest Service and all your normal activities get called to the Sundance fire, or did they bring in people from outside?
They brought in people from outside. We stayed right on the district, and we actually hired crews and dispatched them out to the fire. We hired, I know, 4 or 5 different crews. We had equipment on standby, and we had loggers playing poker in the kitchen, and they were waiting. If a fire started, we had cats on lowboys. I mean, we were ready to roll at the drop of a hat if we did have a fire. And we did have some fires. I know on up on Gleason Ridge between Squaw Valley and the Moore Creek Meadows, we had let's see, we had 5 fires one night, and they all went from A to B. We were able to keep them in a B. An A fire is a 1/4 acre or less. A B fire is from 1/4 acre to 10 acres, and they got up to 5 acres in just no time. But we were able to stop them at that. We didn't have real erratic winds or anything, so we were able to stop them. But the fire danger was so dry that any strike started a fire. I mean, it was dry lightning, and so it kept us busy. And we did that until in 1967. They started dismantling the fires or sending people home when they got a little bit of rain, and a bunch of us went up and kind of mopped up the Sundance and the Trapper Creek fire and those, but we were on them, but we didn't. When the fires were really going, we were on the district and we were taking care of the district fires.
Well, Carl, we haven't heard from you.
Well, I started my career in 1972, and I started down in Grangeville. And early in my career, I spent a lot of time in reforestation, tree planting, inventory, doing stand exams, thinning. Actually, I run a chainsaw for a couple of years, thinning, which was all right. But as far as from a fire standpoint, one of the things I learned early on, and it didn't take me long, and it's the best thing I ever did, is how to run a torch. That's what is good times. And I love it just as much today as I did back then. I love to put a little fire on the landscape. It's a good thing.
Pyromaniac.
Yes, I am. So, and anyway.
You haven't been to San Diego lately, have you?
And, well, there's another lesson there. I'll mention that in a little bit. But I was a year in Grangeville, and then I went to private industry for a while, and then I went back over and started at Newport. And my first day there, it was in September, and BPA, they were punching a line from, I don't know, went through our district and went up Winchester Creek and up and over to Chihuahua, I think. And they politely decided they needed to burn some piles along there. Well, that weekend we had a big storm, and it put fire all over the hillsides, and needless to say, I showed up my first day there was Monday, and they shipped me out on the fire line, and there was a guy by the name of Clyde Foster, and he was all over that place, and I was just a youngster at the time, and I swear, every time I seen him, he was just going like hell. Yeah. And then another thing I learned in my career is don't go to Southern California. That's just not a place to go fight fire. Didn't care for that country at all. But I spent most of my career at Newport, primarily, again, reforestation, TSI, timber stand improvement. Did a lot of contract administration. And then toward the end of my career, I had like 4 years left. It was exactly 4 years. And I spent, like I said, a lot of time in reforestation, that type of stuff. And I hit a point in my life where I said, I need a challenge. So the fire control officer position opened up, and I said, yeah, I'm going to put my name on that and see if I get it. And I got it, and I got my challenge. And it was very challenging because I had to basically learn a whole new thing. But the best part about it is it turned me loose so I could have my matches. And,
I have a question for any of you guys want to answer it. How has fire control changed, say, from 1960 or 70 to now?
Well, we controlled them early, and now they manage them. And that's the long and the short of it. I don't know how many they put out anymore, but
Well, Gary sees that firsthand now.
Oh yeah.
You're more qualified for that one.
Yeah, I mean, for 45 years or whatever when I started, I didn't matter middle of the night or whatever. You went out and put the fire out. That was it. And just so many things have changed that there's times I wonder now that they take too long deciding, so they've even lost that option to put it out while it's small. But so many things that safety. I don't think we were necessarily unsafe, but the things that anytime something happens bad, why there's this tendency for the knee-jerk reaction and another rule in the book or whatever, and it's just entirely different ball game now. But the one thing though, and it doesn't matter whether you call it global warming or whatever, climate change, right? That is definitely different. I mean, Joe talked about all the lightning fires in Gold Creek. Remember one day that I had the south end, Don was up north, and we had 55 fires between 2 days, and a lot of them up there in that Gold Creek. That was just a lightning alley through there. But along probably the mid 80s, got a pattern change because we don't get the lightning like we used to. Tends to be maybe a little drier, but don't have the starts. And like it was pretty easy. Priest Lake District averaged 30 fires a year. And now if they get 1 year out of 6 or 8 that they get 20 fires, that's a big year. But the other side of it though is that it said fire season goes a lot longer, and it's the burning side. It's changed that. I mean, just this year so far, Priest Lake, they didn't have a lot to burn, but they haven't burned one day up there. It just seemed like we get these extremes in weather. You get the nice warm weather, and they need one more day of drying, but to burn something, and then the rain came in instead.
Well, they started doing spring burns, I think, when you were there. When we started. We never did that earlier until late 70s.
Yeah, we started spring burning. I think it was about then, about 1970, and we learned right on that you had to make sure you monitor them, because you did get some holdovers once in a while. But it's a very good time to burn. You get into prescription a lot of days, and you can do a lot of good. A lot of understory burning is really good in the spring.
Is there a lot more burn material in the woods now than there was 20 years ago?
Well, I think it's the same, but as we don't do any management, there's a lot of, especially on the Forest Service side, you're getting a lot more build up with stuff's dying and piling up, and we aren't doing a lot of management, and I think it's wrong, but it's the way it is.
I've noticed, well, of course I'm in the office most of the time, but I know now they rely more on the smoke jumpers out of Missoula, and let's see, there was something else. They get a lot of help from the state of Idaho across the lake there, Coolum or Kavanaugh Bay.
Department of Lands.
It's the Department of Lands, the Idaho Department of Lands, and so they do a lot of sharing back and forth. We help them, and they help us. I think there's fewer fires up there. They've just contacted maybe more different people, different areas and different sections in order to bring them together on a fire. Well, they did that to a certain extent in the 70s, but now, right now they've probably got about, about 10 or 12 people in the fire crew now, and they can't draw outside from that. They can't draw from the cedar trees. they can't draw from the silviculture. There's no silviculture up there. There's no timber up there per cruise. So they've got to get help from across the lake. You know, Idaho Department of Lands, and then the smoke jumps. Of course, the smoke jump has always been available. But they get help from other districts, from don't have nothing going. They'll bring them up, different crews up, and they'll help out. But that's what's been going on up there now.
This has been, sounds like you've had, it's a big, serious responsibility what you're doing. But there have to be some really hilariously funny moments. Maybe they were not so funny at the time, but now they are. Do you have any stories like that to share?
Joe does.
Yeah,
Joe
he
on the
laughed
lookout.
first.
What was that?
I think Joe needed
Gold
to tell that
Peak.
story about Gold Peak.
When we took it down?
Yeah. Kind of go into that. Why did they start tearing lookouts down, Joe?
Well, they started abandoning lookouts because probably funding and not much need anymore. And there's one at Gold Peak, and Dan said, "We gotta take Gold Peak down." So you and Bob Pearsall, you Priest River boy, he said, "Why don't you and Bob go up there and do that?" I had a blaster's permit, so we loaded the truck up with some powder and we went up there. We had a Jeep forward cab, forward control they called it. It always looked like it was going to tip endways.
I got one, Joe.
Yeah. We went up there and we sawed out notches out of 3 legs, and then we put powder in them, and we touched it off, and the old lookout just stood there. It never even quivered. So we thought, well, let's hook the winch of the Jeep to it, and then we'll put more powder in it. So we hooked the Jeep winch to the lookout the way we wanted it to go. And then we put more powder in the legs, and we put the pressure on the winch to start moving it. And we touched it off, and it just stood there again. But pretty soon you could see a wiggle, and pretty soon, very, very slowly, it started to go. And our Jeep's attached to it. And I guess that's not called planning ahead. But that lookout took a long time to tip over, and finally it went. And as it was going, it started walking down the mountain. It looked like a great big spider just going like this, And it finally tipped over and took the Jeep with it. But it never hurt the Jeep, which was a good thing.
Well, whose Jeep was it? The Forest Service? or yours?
Oh yeah. Some of your local bimbos. and then another time we lost our tanker, burned up.
Yeah, that was open Goose Creek.
Yeah, that wasn't funny.
Then, but yeah.
Well,
Joe saw it first.
Oh, go ahead. Go on, right?
It was Ed McCallum.
Yeah, Ed
McCallum.
McCallum. Yeah.
He had his tanker parked close to the edge of a burn that we've been doing. And apparently it starter shorted out, and it had first gear and it rolled down into the burn next to a hot log, caught the front end on fire. And the time they got up there, was about a 30-foot flame coming off the roof.
Yeah.
It was a goner.
Yeah, it was.
Nothing you could do.
I to this day I'm convinced that Ed did everything he should have, but the starter shorted out and started that thing moving.
There was little piles of dirt.
Yeah,
behind
there
the
were
rear
piles
wheels.
of dirt under each wheel where the wheels were spinning.
Yeah.
But it was gone. When I retired, they gave me some molded metal with a key in it.
We have about 5 minutes left, and I was wondering if there's anybody else that has some stories to tell.
John must have
I
too.
might have a few about these guys. How about that?
Are there any bear stories? Tell all.
I tell you what, once Gary left the Forest Service, the trails went to hell. he made sure that they were maintained. He's famous for maintaining trails. He says, I want to be able to get there if there's a fire. And by golly, you did a good job, Gary. I want you to know that, okay? The poor guy had to work for me, so it was a tough way. And Wayne, I wouldn't pick on you, Wayne. No. Okay. Joe Hawley knows me. He probably don't remember me.
I'm trying to.
Yeah. Okay. Good. But you had already retired, but you were already famous. Okay. All the other guys talked about you, and when I didn't get up there till '94. Okay. So it was quite later, but I actually Don and Larry they escaped me. Okay, they retired in '92, and
it was coming.
but I actually knew him from fire on fire assignments, and like Larry said, he was fire behavior analysis, and so when he'd come up and work on my team or something, so that worked well. This guy I really didn't know until I borrowed some hodags to go plant Boy Scout camp from him, and since then we've become pretty good friends, I think. And he at least once in a while he drinks one of my beers.
Let's be honest, I whip him a crib too.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
Hey, I think we won a game or two.
Yeah. we do have a challenge once in a while. The fire organization in itself is something else, and he talked about a guy named Clyde Foster. And the first year I went, 1962 at Newport Ranger District, I was a young summer help out of Iowa State in Newport, and I worked on Ron Hendershot's brush crew. Okay, and next year he was under me, but that's all right. But Clyde Foster was there, and that is a working man. And you remember Mac's restaurant right on the corner?
Yeah.
Okay.
State line.
Yeah.
Well, that's where we all ate in the evening.
Didn't that burn down?
Yeah, we burned it down. No, we didn't do that. Clyde would come in and he would order a hamburger or something like that until his steak got there. Okay, that guy could eat too. But he was one of the best carvers in the world. I've got a box, a whole chain of boxes with little balls in them that he carved one break and handed it to me. It was just really neat. Okay, but those are the memories you remember. Okay. And working with these guys, every one of these guys, they're in fire. They're well known, okay, and they all got a lot of experience, So it's really cool, And then you get guys like Brad Mingay over there, okay, yeah. Well, Brad is a computer guru, and the rest of us aren't. He kept us alive sometimes there, but he was also in silviculture, and you fought a few fires, didn't you? Yeah. Okay. But you want to we're running out of time, Brad. I turned it over. See, you see that?
Talk fast, Brad. Come on.
I worked for John up there, and after we both retired at the same time in 1998, and after that I've been bossing him around. So, yeah, it was a great career. These guys, I tried to avoid the fires as much as I could, but I was on I used to be an EMT up at Priest Lake, volunteer EMT, and I was on the regional EMT crew that went out with the higher class teams on the big fires and helped out there when I could. But yeah, it was a great career. I really enjoyed working with all these guys.